When working with lazy lists in Jetpack Compose, it's often useful to have information about your current list state, like which item in the list you are scrolling by, where in the list you are, and have information about the list state so that, for example, when you are past the first item, when you are at the bottom of the list, you can, for example, add a button that allows you to return the user to the top of the list. Fortunately, Jetpack Compose has the capability that gives us information about the list state. So in this video, we are going to talk about lazy list state and also the scrolling capabilities of lazy list that allows us to scroll to a desired item in the list. So let's get started with our list from the previous video. It was a grid, but I'm going to change it back to a normal list, a vertical list that we had created in previous videos. So in the set content section, I'm going to change my grid by commenting it out, and I'm going to call instead my vertical list UI. Let's run it. Okay. Next, I go to the body of my vertical list UI, and here I'm going to create a state that allows me to track the state of the list. So I type val list state, and for its value, remember lazy list state. All right, now I have a variable that is assigned, remember lazy list state, that allows me to track the state of the list by using it as a parameter in lazy columns parentheses. There's a parameter for lazy column called state. For its value, I use this variable list state. All right. Now the value of list state will be automatically updated by Jetpack Compose, and it will reflect in real time where I am in the list, which item I'm scrolling by, and some other useful information that can be useful for our purposes. So let's see what information is available in list state. For example, list state has first visible item scroll offset, which reflects the amount of scroll offset for the first item in the list that is visible. The amount of its scroll is reflected in this variable. Also, it has first visible item index, which item we are currently scrolling. For example, when I am in the beginning of the list, the value will be 1 because I'm at the first item index. Then it will be 1. It was 0 for the first item. Then when I'm at the second item, it will be 1, and so on and so forth. We also have information about interaction source that we are not going to deal with, and we also have layout info that gives really useful information, like for example the number of items in your list, total items count, and viewport end offset, viewport start offset. And based on the scenario of your application, these information can be really useful. But in this video, we are only going to use 2 of these pieces of information. First visible item index and first visible item scroll offset. To show you how these values are updated when we are scrolling the list, I'm going to change the layout of my lazy list first from the current one that creates this sticky header for groups of information. I'm going to change that. Let's actually copy this section, the row, because it will be useful for us. The row section, let's copy that. And then I'm going to comment out the present layout, and in the body of my lazy column, first I'm going to create a sticky header. Already we have a sticky header, so I uncomment that. It's already showing list of contacts. It's showing a title for the list. I'm going to change that. I will show different information here, and also I will change its text style to a different style. I will use subtitle 1. Let's use a background of yellow for it. And what information we are going to show? First item index. The current item index is available in our list state, so we can display it here. Inside the string, I access list state, first visible item index, and some description for it. First visible item index, alright. Let's go to the next line by adding \n, and then I add a plus to go to the next line to continue the string. And then the other piece of information that is available in our list state is the amount of scroll offset for the first visible item. So I access that information as well. List state dot first visible item scroll offset. First visible item scroll offset. Let's make them capital, the first letters of these words. And then let's add our row. After the sticky header, we have our row for the items. So I add items, and its list is profiles list. And for each item, we are going to create a row. We need to pass our profile item to this list so that the variable profile is known here. All right. And I'm going to change the background of my rows to something different. Let's see what it is currently. For the row, let's add a background. After clickable, I'm going to add a background of color dot dark gray, and I'm gonna run the application. Let's see the output, what we have so far. All right, as you can see, we have our items in the list. Our row needs a little bit of a padding, so let's add our background before the padding, because the modifiers are applied in order, and now it displays better. All right, as I'm scrolling, notice that these values are being outdated. First visible item is being changed. First visible item index changed to 2, now changes to 3. And in order to see the difference better, I'm going to specify the name that is currently displayed. So add a \n here to go to the next line, and the name that is being displayed, current profile. The current profile that is being displayed is profiles list state dot first visible item index. This gives us the profile object at this index from the list, and then we can access its fields like name. We need to display the name here. Let's run it. All right, current profile is John, the first visible item index. Let's also align the text to the beginning. Text line is center. I'm gonna make it start so that the text is aligned to the left. All right. Current profile is John, then Andrew. As we are approaching Andrew, the current profile changes to Andrew. And when we reach almost the half of the height of Andrew, by scrolling, it changes to Eliza. The first visible item changes to Eliza. Then it changes to Edward. The item index changes to 4. And the scroll offset is also being updated. For Jackie, you can see that it is decreasing until it reaches 0. And when we scroll by Jackie, at this point, when it's about to switch to Jade, it also reaches 0. It actually increases to 500 at this point, and then when we scroll forward, it decreases. Yes. You can use this information based on your application needs. What we are going to do with these values, for example, I'm going to use item index, first visible item index, to decide whether I want to display a button or not. When this item, the first visible item, is beyond the first item, this means that I have scrolled the list forward and I'm not at the first item, so I can display a button here or anywhere else on this screen that allows me to scroll back automatically to the top of the screen, and this will allow the user have a better user experience by facilitating the navigation of this list. So let's create another list that will allow us to achieve that purpose. I'm going to create 2 other variables here. First, I'm going to create a derived state based on this state. Val show button by, remember, this is the way that we create derived states, a state that is derived from another state. Derived state of list state dot first visible item index is bigger than 0. If it is bigger than 0, we know that we need to display show button. Other than that, it will be false. And also, I'm going to create a coroutine scope because we need it for scrolling the items programmatically. So I create a scope variable, I name it scope, and then remember coroutine scope And in order to scroll the items, and as I said, we need a button, and to add the button easily to my list and to a part of this screen, I can use the scaffold class, the scaffold composable. It's not a class, it's a composable from Jetpack Compose that allows me to easily define a floating action button. So what I'm going to do is I wrap all my lazy column that I have here. This is my lazy column. I wrap the whole lazy column like this, and then I press the opening curly brace. It will be automatically wrapped in a pair of curly braces like this, and here I'm going to type scaffold to use the scaffold composable. I import it from the material package, and then I add a parameter for it because it has a lot of parameters. One will be especially useful for us in this video, and that is floating action button. For the floating action button, I'm going to use an extended floating action button. Extended floating action button. And as you can see, it has a text parameter and an onClick. For the text parameter, I'm gonna use a simple text jump to top, and for its onClick I perform the scroll, and that scroll is performed using the scope that I created here, the coroutine scope. I launch a coroutine scope here. I launch a coroutine using the provided scope, and then I say list state animate scroll to item. Which item I'm going to scroll to with that button? I'm going to scroll to the top item, the first item, the item with index 0. So I use 0 for the index parameter, and also I don't want to display this button all the time. I want to display it only when I need to, only when show button is true. So I can say if show button, then display floating action button. Sorry, I put it before extended floating action button. I say if show button is true, then extended floating action button. But in order to add a little bit of animation to it, I can wrap my extended floating action button and put a pair of curly braces around it by pressing Shift and the starting curly brace, and then use animated visibility. This will use a nice animation for the appearance and disappearance of the button. Animated visibility, it has a parameter visible. For its visible parameter, I use show button, and that's it. It will animate the appearance and disappearance of the button automatically. But since this composable is experimental, I need to add opt-in experimental animation API to the using composable. Alright. Also, let's add an icon for our floating action button. This was for the text. After text, I add another item, icon, and for the icon, I use icon icons dot default dot, let's import icons from the material package, and then keyword arrow up. Let's also add a content description for it. I use null, and that's it for our floating action button. Let's run our application. As you can see, by default the button is not displayed, our floating action button, but if we scroll our list forward and pass to the next items, the item appears with an animation using animated visibility, and as we scroll, this button remains visible, and we can use the button by clicking it, and it will help us animate to the beginning of the list. It will help us scroll to the beginning of the list like this. Yes, we are back in the beginning of the list, the first item indexed 0. One more time, the button is displayed. When we pass the first item, it remains visible, and anytime we can click it and it will scroll the list back to the first item. Since I'm running this application on an emulator, the animation for the scroll is not very visible, but on a real device this will be better visible, and you can see how it animates and scrolls to the first item in your list. Note that in order to move to an item in your list, and it doesn't have to be the first item, based on the requirement of your app, you might need to scroll to a different item in your list, like for example scroll to item number 6, item number 10. You can say animate scroll to item 10, and it will scroll it to that item. And also to move to an item, we have another function, scroll to item, and it will perform a simple scroll without animation. Let's run it with this function, list state dot scroll to item, jump to top, and as you can see, it is scrolling to the top but without animation. So I change it back to animate scroll to item. So in this video you learned how we can keep track of the current state of our lazy list by using remember lazy list state, and also how we can scroll to a certain item in our list, we created a coroutine scope that allowed us to scroll to a desired item in the list. So with that, I wrap up this video.